So my name is Tanya Faison. I'm with Black Lives Matter Sacramento. I'm here today because we had an incident here at the California State Fair at Cal Expo with the Cal Expo Police Department. I just want to start off by saying that this is the 5th incident with a child and law enforcement in the city that we've fought for, and that's too much. That's too many. It just shows the disproportion in how black teens and black youth are impacted by law enforcement and getting terrorized by law enforcement in this city. I want to go ahead and explain really briefly what happened, but I'll let them go into more detail. We have Elijah with us, and he was at the fair with his family and his friends and his mom, and he was playing with his friends in line, and he got tackled by law enforcement here. And they took him and they wouldn't let him bring his mother with him. They interrogated him, and that's just unacceptable. It's against the law. So we're gonna let some folks speak to it. We do have a few demands. BLM Sacramento has a few demands. We want to get the names of the officers that were involved in this incident. We also want them to be terminated for child abuse. They shouldn't be at a fair on Kids Day if they can't treat kids like human beings. We also want to know if the Cal Expo Police Department has body cameras, and if they do, we need to see the video and hear the audio on those cameras. And we need to hear them without edits or narrations. And then also, lastly, we want some policies put in place and oversight to prevent any future incidents where there is child abuse by law enforcement at Cal Expo again. I'm going to go ahead and let Betty Williams with the Sacramento NAACP give a statement.
Thank you, Tanya. I'm Betty Williams. I'm the president of the Greater Sacramento NAACP, and we are here in support of Mr. Hunter and his mom. It's ironic that I stand here before you because this young man is 14 years old. And so
he's 11.
Oh, that's even worse. He's 11 years old. He's a child. He's a child. And the fact that I'm standing here, my very first press conference as the president of the NAACP more than a decade ago was right here at Cal Expo when they put the water hose on us and were attacking black people during Black Culture Day. And for me to come here today and to hear that Cal Expo Police Department or police arm attacked this young man, one. Two, the fact that he was horseplaying with other individuals that doesn't look like him, meaning they're not black, was never brought into law enforcement. Thirdly, for them to separate mom, take her away from her 11-year-old child, and then interrogate him and make him sign a document without his mother, what makes him different from any other 11-year-old? And I'll tell you what it is. He's black. He's a black man, a black male. It doesn't matter your age when it comes to the society and law enforcement. You are treated differently, and he should have never been treated this way. No other child within his group was brought into that facility. No other, just him. And for me to stand here today and see that we are still dealing with some of the same issues is embarrassing, and it shouldn't happen. The fact that NAACP is support of looking at the body cameras as well. The fact that we need to look at the oversight, and I understand that they have a cultural committee, but I'm wondering if they were even notified of this incident. I am going to be reaching out to the Sheriff's Department because I understand there was sheriff involved, so I will be reaching out to Scott Jones. In addition to the director here at Cal Expo and reaching with a meeting with him to find out why did this happen, what did they do to prevent it, what have they done with the family as far as communication to rectify this. Apparently nothing, since the family had to hire an attorney. And at this time, I am going to bring back the attorney so that he can explain his portion. Yes? Okay, I'm going to bring back Tanya, but it's important that you know that the NAACP, the oldest civil rights organization, is in support of this young man, this 11-year-old child, this 11-year-old black young man, this 11-year-old that was interrogated by police officers and forced to sign a document. What makes him different than any other 11-year-old? He's a black 11-year-old male. That's what makes him different. And that's why we're standing here today to address his civil rights issues that were clearly violated during the time of the fair. Tanya?
All right, so I'm going to have the mother, Cynthia, come up and give a statement.
Can you give your full name, please?
Yes, good morning. My name is Cynthia Martin, and I'm the mother of Elijah. Thank you for being here. It's unfortunately that we have to be here at this occasion, but I would not be any other place because I support my child 100%, as I did last Tuesday on Kids Day here at the State Fair. It is a tradition that we come to the fair each year with our children and our family to let them be children and have fun. But unfortunately, on Kids Day, last Tuesday, we met a nightmare, a horrific, life-scarring, emotional event. The police terrorized my family and my child. It is a night that has been scarred and etched in our brain forever. My child is not the same. He would normally be outside playing every day at the park, at the skate park, enjoying his friends. He has been withdrawn ever since that emotional, traumatizing event with the police department. He has not been doing his usual activities because he's scared. He has been terrorized by the police department. He has never had this type of interaction with the law enforcement at all. The police officers dragged him and beat him up. They pulled him off of the ride after he was kicked off of the ride, and they chased him down and beat him. He has visible scars and emotional scars and injuries because of this event. The police department themselves provided first aid that night and bandaged his bleeding arm. His shirt was covered with blood in their presence. So they knew that they injured him because they provided the first aid before we even made it to Kaiser Hospital, where he did receive further treatment for his injuries. Excuse me. We were all traumatized by this event. I was begging and pleading the officers, "This is my child. Please let me come in." They refused to let me come into the interrogation room and slammed the door in my face. They took my child in there. They knew he was a minor. There was an outrage of several eyewitnesses. I don't know any of these people that eyewitnessed this event in addition to my family that was there at the fair. They all came up to me. They were in outrage that this had happened. They gave me their names and their phone numbers that night. They have expressed to me they will do anything to support my child and the mistreatment and abuse that the police department provided to him that night. These are unbiased witnesses that I do not know and had never met prior to that night. So far, there's 12 people. If there's additional people, because I saw them taking videos, please come forward and contact my attorney. They refused to let my child be in the presence of his parents while they were interrogating him and questioning him and forced him to sign a document. He was not aware of that document. He had no idea what he was signing, and they threatened him that if he did not sign it, he would have further consequences. That was a direct threat to my 11-year-old child who's never had police interaction. My child is an honor roll student. He's been on the honor roll several years. He is not a bad child, and he did not deserve to get assaulted by the police officers for horseplaying in line with his friends. And these were all the kids that came with us to the fair. These are my neighbors' children and my children. My husband and myself, we brought all of the kids to the fair on Tuesday, Kids Day. So these were not strangers that he was horseplaying with in the line. These were all the same kids that rode in my car with us to the fair. But he was the only child that got beaten by the police. The other children that came with us to the fair do not look like him. In the neighborhood that we live in, most of the children don't look like us. Most of the families don't look like us. We have worked very, very hard to provide a good, stable, safe home atmosphere and environment for our children. And their friends don't look like him. So the other children that he was horseplaying with in line have blonde hair and blue eyes, and brown hair and brown eyes, and light colored skin. They are non-black. But none of those children were touched or assaulted by the officers. Only my child. Thank you very much for your support. Thank you for being here. My child is not the same. He is emotionally scarred from this event. He would normally be outside every day playing at the park, at the skate park with his friends. He's withdrawn. I'm outraged at the civil rights violations of the police department. They violated not only his civil rights, but my civil rights and our family's civil rights. No child should ever be interrogated at 11 years old without their parents' presence. And I was there. They slammed the door in my face and refused to let me in. I was begging and pleading with the officers, please let me in. They slammed the door in my face and said no. When I tried to push my way in, they threatened to arrest me. They stated I was interfering with police business. And they had my child in the interrogation room. I'm outraged. Children should be safe at the fair. This is a family-friendly event environment. This was Kids Day. This was Tuesday, Kids Day. The day that everyone should feel safe as a family to come to the fair and not be terrorized by the police department and assaulted and have visible injuries and visible scars and emotional scars that the police department provided the first aid themselves, so they knew they injured him. Then I took him to Kaiser Hospital. They provided further medical treatment. Thank you very much for your time.
Can you tell us what document you signed? What was the document?
The document was a no trespassing document. I gave a copy of it to the attorney. He can talk further about it and describe the details of the document. But he wasn't doing anything to no trespass. He was on fair property. We paid our money to come here. We spent hundreds of dollars that day because I had a total of 6 kids with me. I paid for all of their rides, hundreds of dollars on food. We played games. We did everything. We spent close to $1,000 on Tuesday for everybody collectively. At the end, to have this traumatic event happen.
What was the nature of this injury?
My attorney will talk about that in more detail, and the Kaiser Medical Department has the medical results, and those will be kept confidential.
Where was this interrogation room?
It was in some kind of building on that. It looks like that building right there.
Does he remember any questions they asked him during interrogation?
Yes.
Can you tell us more about that?
We'll have my attorney speak on that. Thank you.
All right, so we're going to have Attorney Mark Merin speak next.
Thank you, Tanya. Thank you, Cynthia, for allowing me to represent Elijah here at this press conference and in court. My name is Mark Merin. I do civil rights work here in Sacramento. And unfortunately, this is not the first occasion where we've been called in to try to get some compensation, some justice for people who have been injured at the state fair. But this particular event is really shocking and different from the others, because you have a young man, an African-American young man, who was accused by somebody of doing something wrong, but it was not in the knowledge of the officers who chased him and tackled him as to what, if anything, he was accused of and what he had done. Instead, they just lit out after him, and he was scared and ran. They then tackled him, gouged his arm, lacerated his arm, knocked him into a fence, and he was bleeding. The people who were watching this, who saw what was happening, were outraged themselves and were screaming, "He's just a child, leave him alone, don't do that." They brought him down by choking him, hands around the neck, and this is from witnesses who saw this. They volunteered these statements. We were contacted and have spoken with many people who have video recordings of what they saw. So they not only tackled him, injured him, bleeding, then his mother was present and refused to allow her to have any kind of connection to her son at the time, kept her away, then took him into a private area, a trailer of some sort, a structure, where out of her presence he was interrogated. Now, there were three things that happened that were wrong already. First is, officers went after and manhandled and used force on a young man without having seen anything. So they are prohibited from actually arresting somebody unless they have some personal knowledge of what happened. They didn't. So immediately there's a false arrest. When a person is restrained in their liberty and unable to move voluntarily, that's an arrest. Whatever you want to call it, that's an arrest. Then they obviously used excessive force against him in that false arrest. Then they took him someplace out of his mother's presence, which is a violation of the constitutional rights of the mother, the due process of the mother, as well as the family. And we all have heard of the Miranda rights. If a person is going to be interrogated, they have to be advised that they have a right to be represented, they have a right not to speak, that anything they say could be used against them. Now, one has to wonder, who are these officers dealing with? What do they think an 11-year-old is going to be able to do in terms of his consciousness, whether he can even understand the Miranda warnings, and then voluntarily waive them? I mean, it's outrageous that these officers would think that was acceptable. Then to intimidate him on pain of further consequences into signing something that he had no knowledge of. And it's a form that you can check the little boxes on the form, and what they accused him of doing at one point on this form was jumping a fence. That's what the official line is. They didn't accuse him of trespassing, although it's a trespass form. No boxes were checked, and he had to sign this, but he had no understanding of what the consequences are for signing a form that he couldn't read or understand. So it's outrageous, and what this brings to mind is the absence of appropriate training, the absence of appropriate supervision, the lack of knowledge of the officers who would engage in this reprehensible conduct. So those things have to change. This is a state fair. The officers are state officers, and they because the attendance swells and shrinks, they often employ other officers from other jurisdictions, so the county sheriffs or local police officers may be moonlighting here at the fair. So we don't actually know what the employment arrangement was for the officers who were involved in this situation. But what we do know is that it was wrong from the get-go, and it's caused a lot of trauma to this family. And we hope through this experience, and unfortunately the litigation that's going to follow, is that we'll have some changes at the state fair. Thank you.
Have you spoken to the fair or the police chief of the fair?
No, that will come in due course, but obviously we have to go through their counsel. So we don't get to speak to them directly until there's litigation filed, and then we are permitted under the processes of the court to actually do depositions.
Have you seen witness videos?
I haven't seen the videos, no, they haven't been sent to me yet, but I've spoken to to several of the witnesses, aside from the mother, and aside from Elijah himself, that described what happened.
You don't have any names of the officers or anything like that right
I
now?
don't have the names of the officers.
And you said he was accused of something. What is that something that he was accused of to set this
Well,
whole
that's a
thing
good
off in
question.
motion?
We don't know what these officers knew, if anything, but they obviously got it from some third party. What was written on the form was jumping a fence.
Do you
Ride fence, the kind they have for the ride?
That's I'm telling you what the form said, just jumping a fence. Now, what Elijah's experience was is he was in line to go onto a ride, and then was excluded from the ride, and then waited. And when he walked with his friends away from the ride, these officers started following him, and they scared him, and he ran. And when he ran, they tackled him, and that's where that started. That part.
Attorney Merin, do you suspect any level of racism from based on what his mom said? It sounded like he was singled out because of his color.
Well, it sounds that way. We have to find out what these officers knew or heard, whether they were, maybe that he was identified as an African American child that they were looking for, but otherwise I have no knowledge, but I would think it's suspicious. If there's a group of children and it's only the black kid who's picked out, I mean, it raises some questions at least.
Can you describe the rough and tumble horseplay that was going on, or was it just, I mean, a little specific?
There was some jockeying about who was going to get to sit in the front of the roller coaster ride. That's my understanding.
Have you all spoken to anyone at Cal Expo? I did speak to a spokesperson. They told me that they had to listen to Rhodes' video where he's seen running through the rides, maybe trespassing, and he might have put himself at risk for the rides. That was their explanation.
Well, I'd like to see those videos. We haven't seen that yet. Maybe we'll have an understanding of what motivated them, but that's certainly not the story that we have.
So just to clarify, leading up to when the officers confronted him, he was in line to be on a ride, or he was about to be on the ride and got kicked off the ride?
He was walking away from the ride with his group of friends.
Oh.
Around what time did the incident occur?
It was around 11 o'clock at night. I think the fair closed at midnight that night.
Do you want to talk about the extent of the injuries at all?
Well, I can. From what I understand, and I actually saw the marks on Elijah's body. There were gashes, lacerations, bruises. But really, in this kind of situation, you're really talking about the emotional trauma. A child, having gone through that, it just becomes very guarded, each child, of course, is different, but very wary of authority, afraid, and that's a change that the family has been able to observe. Tanya had something to add.
I just want to say that it doesn't matter what any child does. There's nothing that validates grown men that are law enforcement, supposed to be here to protect and serve the people that are at this fair, There's nothing that validates what they did to him. I don't care if he was running in between, if he jumped a fence, if he's running from them, if he's cutting in line, it does not matter. If it's horseplay and they don't like horseplay, then you tell a child, hey, stop doing that. I'm the police, you need to stop it. Otherwise, there's no reason to tackle a child. Do you see how small he is? He's tiny. There's nothing that validates that. Nothing. Sorry.
There was a lot of talk about extra security this year and the security measures. Do you think that played a factor into that? Or did you hear that there were extra officers that night or in general?
I haven't heard anything. Did you?
I did hear that there was extra security that they had hired, but and it's not specifically for that night. They just had hired extra security. And I just want to comment again what Tanya just said. He's 11 years old. Horseplaying. He's an 11-year-old kid horseplaying with grown-ass men with guns on their hips. Took him down. Didn't take down